I quit. Of course, you don't like to hear this phrase. It means that someone is going to leave your organization. Well, there are sometimes people where you say, okay, not a problem. Feel free to go. Goodbye. It's a sealed deal. Never going to see you again. But let's face it, in today's times, most likely you would like to keep the people you have on board, no matter if it's an A, B, or C player. If you want to use these categories, I'm not a big friend of them. However, if you lose someone who only barely does the job, getting someone new on board from the job ad to the interview phase, the decision, and then the onboarding until they're able to work properly on their own, most likely it takes 6 to 9 months, most likely in qualified industries or qualified jobs even longer. So there's a rising amount of people quitting their jobs. There's a rising amount of people who say, thank you, no, thank you. There's a rising amount of people who either go into self-employment to another employer simply because of, in most cases, leadership behavior, rarely in the case that only the organization didn't do too well. There are more options on the market, and there's a high level of safety and security where people know there's a pretty low risk of unemployment, especially in today's times. There's, at least in most countries, a pretty good social network, which gets extended extended and expanded in most countries, not all of them. For example, when we look into the UK or in the US, not as great as you have in other countries. However, of course, there are also other aspects which are, for example, cultural or from your family's background, maybe based on your savings or what you achieved in your life so far. There's probably a risk appetite to a certain level that people say, let's try something new, or let's just try not to work for a couple of months and then see where this journey goes. And of course, I know what most people of you will think now. They will say, well, okay, exit interview. That is the plan. The usual approach is you do one exit interview and then you part your ways. That is an option. However, I do not really prefer that approach. It's an approach which you can do. However, in my opinion, is not the best approach. A better approach is a 2-part system. The day someone says they quit, you take time to speak to them on that day. And I know you have busy days, and often you say, I don't have the time right now. Well, you have to make the time, at least if you want to keep that person. So you take time for that person, you meet either online or in person. It is always good to see you, so as to see each other. When you say we do it on the phone, it is less than ideal. It is the last option most likely that you can take. However, it is still better to do that over doing nothing. So how to start this kind of interview? First, always let the other person talk. Why do they quit? What are the reasons? Is there anything we like to do in case you want to keep that employee? Let them talk. You do not interrupt them. There is no justification. You do not get in the mode of, I have to defend my point here. Let them talk. And I know this is very challenging, especially for leaders who have some level of extroversion. After they make their point, part number 2 of the talk is you make your point. You now can, of course, say, this is the message I want to give you. And you always send so-called I messages because they are way better than you messages. I messages, for example, mean I have the opinion that, in my experience, it is. I think that you always talk about your perception, your feelings, your emotions in that situation. You messages are always an insult. You didn't do this. You should see it that way. You must see it from that point of view. And of course, they don't, especially when they already put the level of resignation and their notice in. They don't have to do anything from that point anymore. So always look at what are the facts, what of course are also the relationship level, the emotions, what is it that you like to tell from yourself? So what is the kind of point you want to make by yourself as a manager? And at the end, there's a call to action. If there's a call to action, of course, when you say it is someone who I do not want to keep in the organization, there's most likely just a call to action to wish them best of luck for the future. At the end, you always decide, is there a way for a second talk? Is there a space for a second talk? Is there a foundation for a second properly organized interview? Often there is, sometimes there's not. So, for example, I left some organizations, even an agency which worked together with me due to homophobia, due to their behavior towards women and minorities. And we had a chat because everyone has a right to make their point, and I gave them the chance to make their point. But the only thing I got was, it's a tough industry. I think you're overreacting, and I think this is not as bad as you think. And when they said, can we talk again in a couple of weeks? I said no. Because when people say racism and talking down on women and minorities, including homophobia and anti-Semitism, is something which is acceptable in their point of view or is common in their industry. Hint, it's not. There is no foundation for a second talk. If you have a foundation for a second talk, you put something in the calendar, usually 60 to 90 minutes. Also, please plan a 30-minute break, a pause after the talk, because you have to work through what you agreed in the talk. Between talk 1 and talk 2, between the first and the second interview, do not talk to anyone in any negative way about anything that happened in talk number 1. The typical half-baked phrases which you either talk about at the water dispenser or in the break room or via WhatsApp or wherever else, and any kind of allusion to, oh yeah, we had this issue with that person. Oh yeah, I think we could do this. This immediately makes the round. And then you really have to decide that you do not talk to anyone about this until you found the time where you say, now is time for the talk number 2. And then you sit down for the second interview. Of course, you take your time. Has to be a space where it's quiet, which is private, of course. And once more, the other person opens the talk. So you offer them, what do you think right now? Your emotions, your feeling, the facts. What is your take on the matter? After they made their point, it is your time to talk. You, of course, now have to serve, which Jeffrey Gitomer calls WeFM. What's in it for me? When you sit down at the second interview, at the second exit interview, it is not the time for insult. It is not the time for telling people what they have to do. It is not the time to give pseudo offers or anything similar. And there is no room for negotiations here. Of course, you can make different offers, but you cannot try to get away with something and then react negatively if they do not jump on your offer. I give you an example. Someone says, I leave you as an employer because I love to work in the industry. However, my payment is simply below market rate. I received an offer which is £15,000. It was in the UK, £15,000 higher for the exact same job at a completely comparable company, not a larger or smaller company, completely comparable, same city, same space, same industry, same everything. It was in London. So £15,000 more. And the counter offer was, yeah, could we agree on £5,000 more? And you have to expect that people cut you off at this point because you really convey the impression that you do not listen to them. When they say 15,000, you think it's a trick. You do not trust them. When you don't trust them, you shouldn't have you shouldn't have put the appointment in the calendar in the first place. So it is very important that you need to sort out the facts before. When you say, hey, we can't match 15,000. We could give you 10,000 plus work from home plus a 4-day working week and a company car. That's a different kind of offer, which probably balances out the other offer. So you can make different offers, but just being brash and condescending, making a lower offer because you think you're an oh so great employer. Look on the market today and the talent shortage and the workforce shortage. You are in no position to make these kind of pseudo offers. You need to deliver unambiguously clear solutions. Content. Stop to do the status quo talk. The status quo talk sounds like, oh yeah, we are a very conservative industry and it's tough on the market. It's a hard time for our industry. And yeah, if you want to change something here, we can talk about that, but it will be challenging. Won't be easy. There are no quick changes here. It's like a big ship. It's basically like a cargo ship trying to change direction. It might take years to get that. And then you wonder afterwards why people don't say, what a great offer. Thank you very much. I'd like to stay here. Of course they won't. When you do not have any clear advantage, any clear benefit, any clear offer, you really should question if there is a good space for a second exit interview. The final words of the second exit interview always are either a counteroffer or the end of discussion, and hopefully you part ways on good terms. If you didn't do too well in the 2 exit interviews, do not be surprised when either on Kununu, which is the German version, or Glassdoor.com, which is the English-speaking version, your performance might not be that great. There are a couple of aspects which you genuinely always have to take into consideration. So, for example, let's say someone quits, and they have a 2 weeks notice, and they work in sales. Of course, you can now say, well, 2 weeks notice means that they still have to show up for work. And technically, yes. Well, from a legal point of view, yes, but I never did that. As soon as someone quit, it means that most likely for weeks they thought of that, most likely for months they thought of that. And when they reach the level of I quit, it simply means nothing else than I am through with this. I am done with this. And what do you expect? How do you expect them to work? Either they call in sick, or they don't work very well, or they don't work very much. They can harm your clients. They can steal data at any point in time given very easily, no matter how hard you try to protect it. Why do you try to squeeze the last minutes out of them while very clearly they have no intention to work for your organization in any good way? If you say you need to do that because you have to onboard the other person, quite a hard demand when you obviously failed as an employer. Even when you have someone who didn't do too well and you think they're an entitlement thinker or they are a bad worker, what do you think they do when they onboard the other person? They will tell them, oh, take care of that manager. That is a really difficult person. And, oh, the office politics here, you have to know this and that. And then the whole gossip gets into the new employee from day one. Do you want that? Most likely not. So be very sure that as soon as someone quits, do you really need to have them around in the office anymore? In my opinion, you do not. Next aspect, every non-substantiated bad word will be held against you. I give you an example. When you, for example, say, I can't give you £10,000 more or £15,000 more because I think your motivation isn't high enough, I have the feeling you're not as motivated as others. Your feelings or your impressions or your perception are not relevant at that point in time. When you say, hey, we have 4 employees on your team, 3 people do 60 calls a day, you only do 45, here's the data, that's the point you can make. But the burden of proof is on you, not on the other side. I know that many employers miss the days where they had an abundance of workers who are willing to work for them, while today it's vice versa. Tables turned because many organizations didn't treat their workforce too well. Some people are up for revenge. Not great, but we have to face reality. One bad exit always multiplies. When you have a bad exit where people leave on bad terms, and I do not mean people who are either racist or sexist or anti-Semitic or misogynistic or stole something. When people quit on bad terms just because they didn't get along with their manager, their executive, that always multiplies in the organization, because people will say when there's an issue with leaders, the employee always has to leave. Your reputation online will be horrible. Your reputation offline will be even worse, because people talk about what happened and they talk about that a lot in their industry. A bad exit always multiplies. And this is why you need exit interviews which have a proper structure. You need to professionally train people on exit interviews. And quite often, including just last week where I sat down in a coaching session with someone, it was called an exit interview. And the only thing I saw was an informal talk of a manager who says, hey, can't we just get along and get over this? And yeah, I know we had a bad time here, but can't we just move on? And just stressful times are stressful times. Can't we just move on? I probably heard the term, can we just move on 15 times per hour, if not more often? Again, a bad exit multiplies, and that includes the worsening of the culture and the mood of anyone, including the motivation and productivity, of course, of anyone in the organization. WeFM is what you have to serve. What's in it for me? And the focus is on the employee, not on the employer. I know this is not a favorable, or that's not one of the phrases you like to hear, but it's a phrase you need to hear. So you have to serve the other side if you have any interest to keep them. And I give you one of the examples where you can make up your mind if this went well or not. So someone says, I'm actually leaving this company. I wanted to be a team lead in development, software development. You didn't give me that chance. So thank you. I received a different job offer, same city in London for way more money, with more than £20,000 more. So thanks for the opportunity I had here after uni, but now I move on. And then they said, well, we have a counteroffer, and our counteroffer is you become a team lead and you can open the US market for us, and you will live in Manhattan, and we help you with moving there and with the visa and everything. And that sounded pretty well up to the point where they said, and of course, when you live in Manhattan in the US and you then open the new market for us, which is new for us, and we're very excited to have you still on board, blah, blah, blah. So it sounded pretty good. And then they said, and of course, we pay you $80,000 a year. And that is where the employee simply says, sorry, I really will not sit down for you even for the first chat we're having here. They had a very informal phone call, and $80,000 in Manhattan in New York City. You could be happy if a software developer is willing to work for you for $150,000 on that level, because in New York City, when you live in Manhattan, you pay federal, state, and city tax with an immense level, with a tremendously high level of cost of living, rent, health insurance, and whatnot else. It is very important that you always think of, we FM, you have to serve the other person, not vice versa. There are a couple of guidelines you always have to think of. First, it's never about you. No one cares about your ego or your feelings or your perceptions. Burden of proof is with you. You have to deliver facts. Facts, proof, evidence. Second, personality promotes and ego eliminates your business. So personality is a big factor when people like to work with you. People usually do not leave organizations. People leave people. The number one reason why people leave is still managers' behavior, executives' behavior, where they simply say, unbearable, I have to move on. So when you have that personality aspect, it goes a long way. However, when you simply underpay compared to market rates, sooner or later, you will have to adapt to that, because especially with today's real estate prices, when people say, I have a family, I have children, I need to be safe and secure on that side. Some people will say, look, working for the large corporation might not be as personal. It might not be as nice. And with all the processes in place and compliance and whatnot, it might be very stiff and very formal. However, 20,000 a year is 20,000 a year. And that's a payment which I can just make bearable. This makes it bearable for me to move on to a larger corporation. And you have to compete on the financial side as well. Maybe not as hard as corporate has to do. However, just personality is not enough. If you oversell people on your personality, they will realize that within usually 3 to 6 months, and then just leave a bit later, and they leave even harder and even quicker. And then you probably heard, and that's the third aspect here, never burn bridges. That's nonsense. There are moments where you burn bridges. When you have someone who writes a swastika on your Turkish colleague's locker, where they change every day, then you simply have to say, we burn bridges with them very, very clearly. Anyone has the chance to apologize. Anyone has the chance to face their charges, get the punishment they deserve, and then move on from their reintegration to society, having a second or a third chance even. Anyone has a chance to get that. However, just saying never burn bridges, no matter how hard the offense was, that clearly is a statement that only people who have a maximum level of flexibility morally and ethically, and most likely forgot to grow a spine for quite some time. So I say hardly ever burn bridges, but there are reasons where you burn bridges. I did in the past, and so did many other people who have a very clear compass on morals and ethics. Try to find an exit after the 2 interviews we've figured out here and described here. Try to find an exit which is something comparable to leaving on good terms, but for both sides. If it's possible, it's possible. If it's not, it's not. However, in most cases, when you put the ego behind, then you are able to move on in a good way. And maybe, who knows, a couple of years later, maybe even a decade later or longer, sometimes people return to the former employers because they saw the big world out there, and then they return home and say, I've been there, I've done that, now I'm ready to come home. It's all about timing. But when you have a bad term, when you leave on bad terms, they will most likely remember that. And they come back home, but not to you, but to your worst competitor. I wish you all the best putting this into practice. I know this is a lot of work to do, but always be aware. Not about you, not about your ego or feelings. Personality is a good aspect, but you have to deliver on the facts, and that is your job to make it happen. And of course, I can understand when some people now say that's quite a lot to do, and most likely some of you. So thank you very much for the emails I received last week. This episode happened again based on emails I received last week. If you have anything you'd like to discuss, or any kind of questions you have, additional aspects, or anything where you think I left something out, I forgot to mention something and you'd like to clarify that, just drop me an email. nb@nb-networks.com, and then we take it from there. You also, in the show notes of this podcast, do not only find my email, but also my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect there, and then we can chat from there. The second aspect, which I always mention, is that we have live sessions. We had one just last week that went very, very well. Feel free to join for our live sessions. expert.nb-networks.com. You can sign up with your email just there. It's the leadership letter. It's just 1 email per week every Wednesday morning. It's 100% content at free guarantee. So feel free to sign up there. And then you also, in this leadership letter, which you receive every Wednesday morning, you will see when is the next live session. It's available in English and German. So feel free to bring colleagues with you. Just join us on the time which is mentioned there, and then we take it from there. And the third aspect is the most important one. apply what you heard, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the positive change that you obviously want to see in your organization. I wish you all the best doing so. Contact me anytime if you need any help. I'm available 24/7. And at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.